Welcome to the Diva Details. Welcome to the Diva Details, where bold, confident women embrace life unapologetically. From love and sex to wellness and reinvention, we keep it raw, real, and powerful. No filters, no limits. Just fearless conversations to help you thrive. Let's dive in with Diva Mia.
Well, hello, this is Diva Mia, and today I wanted to reach out to you and talk to you a little bit about heartbreak. There's something uniquely painful about heartbreak later in life. When you are young, heartbreak kind of feels devastating, but there's often an underlying assumption that you have plenty of time. Plenty of people left to meet, plenty of chapters still unwritten. Your next person could be right around the corner. Later in life, however, can feel a little different. You may have already been married, raised children, built businesses, careers, survived divorce, might even had some setbacks with your finances or family struggles, and all these things kind of throw adulthood at you and throw heartbreak at you a little differently. You know yourself better, so when you finally decide to trust someone again, you usually aren't doing it casually. You're making a conscious decision to open a door, and that experience taught you to guard yourself. And when you trust someone and that person cheats on you or disrespects you, it isn't simply heartbreak. It's the shock of realizing that the relationship you thought you were living wasn't entirely the relationship that actually existed. And did you actually know that person at all? Today we're talking about what happens when someone blindsides you with betrayal, how to recognize some of the warning signs, why cheating happens, and most importantly, how you recover without allowing somebody else's choice to define the rest of your life and define who you are. So from the beginning, I think that people can be unhappy in relationships. People can feel lonely. Sex might decline. Sometimes it doesn't. A lot of times I think people think that the reason people cheat is because of a lack of sex, but a lot of times that's not the case. Communication could be breaking down, attraction can change, couples can grow apart. And then there's also just people that have a habitual way of cheating. They're addicted to it. They may be addicted to porn, they may be addicted to the chase or that feeling of constant validation. Even if you give them validation, sometimes their ego is so weak or they're so insecure that they have to find it elsewhere. Those things can happen, but none of those things require cheating, but some people do anyway. A mature adult has options. Most mature adults, they'll communicate with you. They can go to counseling, but they also have to establish boundaries, and you need to establish boundaries. If they're unhappy, why don't they just leave instead of cheating? Because cheating is a decision. And what I found is the people that tend to cheat are the most insecure. They're also the people that are lacking in character because they don't care about other people, because if they did, they would realize that cheating affects them as well. They only care about themselves. They very rarely say, I'm sorry. It requires deciding that instead of cheating, that you should be honest with the person. And if you don't want to be with that person, just let them know. You should be an adult, because what's going to happen is you have to have two realities. You're going to maintain one reality with your partner and secretly create another one with someone else, because you have to have a second relationship with someone else. Honestly, I'm too busy to even understand how people manage the two relationships. One relationship's more than enough for me. That is why I believe cheating ultimately becomes an issue of character. Not because every person who has ever cheated is permanently incapable of becoming a better human being. People can change, but real change requires a lot of accountability. The people that cheat have very low character, very low quality of character. Accountability sounds very different from excuses. And the funny thing is every time you catch a cheater, they always deflect and say it's not true, or they always try to run from it, and they won't address it. It sounds like you weren't giving me enough attention. We didn't have enough sex. You were asking for too much sex. You were always busy. I didn't think you cared anymore. I was drunk when I cheated. I mean, these are some of the excuses that people come up with. It didn't mean anything. It was just sex. Those statements attempt to explain away the behavior. But accountability sounds more like this. I made a selfish decision. I deceived you. I lied to you. You don't have to make me do it. I did it myself, because that's what accountability is. It's when people take responsibility for their cheating. Honestly, if you're a person that goes back to a person that cheats, just be very, very careful, because the trust is gone and it's very difficult to get back. How are you going to trust that person in the future? And there's an enormous difference between accountability and excuses. One of the biggest misconceptions I think about infidelity is that someone must have cheated because the relationship was terrible. And that's not necessarily true. Some people cheat because they like the adrenaline rush. Some people cheat while describing their primary relationship as very happy. They want to see what they can get away with. They feel comfortable that the other person will never leave them. They feel like they have the upper hand, and it can be incredibly difficult for the betrayed person to understand. You start by asking, what the hell was I missing? Or maybe nothing was missing and they're just flawed. Sometimes the attraction isn't a better relationship. Sometimes it's just a novelty, something new. Or they wanted to try something different. Or they need self-validation, because a lot of people need self-validation, especially when they get older. They need their ego boosted by being with a younger person because they're so insecure and weak. Their attention is weak. They want to keep things in secrecy. They want to have flings on the side just to see that they can. And those aren't the type of people that have strong moral character. Those aren't the type of people that are men. Those aren't the type of people that are women. They're little children disguised in men and women's bodies. Just because they have the opportunity to doesn't mean they should. Men and women are supposed to have boundaries. We're supposed to be able to make conscious decisions. And if you make a conscious decision that to cheat, you deserve all the fallout that comes your way. You deserve all the embarrassment that comes your way. But the funny thing is those people that cheat tend to never take accountability. They'll deflect or they'll blame the person that broke up with them. Sometimes people cheat because they want a sexual excitement. They want to try something new, or simply the thrill of doing something forbidden is an adrenaline rush for them. For some people, that novelty-seeking pattern can become very repetitive, and they become habitual cheaters. And then when you break up with them, you wonder, were they cheating before? How many times? Who were they with? And then if they say no one, then you have to really question, because cheaters are liars, so you never know. On top of that, you have to worry about STDs. It's so disrespectful to a partner that you're monogamous with to cheat on them, because you've put their health at risk as well. They may repeatedly pursue excitement associated with secrecy, conquest, or new attention and lie to you. And they give off signals here and there. It doesn't mean that every person who cheats is literally addicted to cheating, but addiction has a clinical meaning, and we shouldn't diagnose people from across the kitchen table, but repetitive cheating absolutely can become a behavioral pattern. This is important to know, because if you're with a person that's cheated and cheated before, then you're going to have to realize that you're going to have to understand the betrayal and realize that they may cheat on you again. And you can drive yourself crazy looking for the things you failed to provide, but a lot of times you were providing exactly what they needed. They were just wanting something different. You may have provided everything that person claimed to want. The problem wasn't necessarily that you weren't enough. The problem may have been that enough wasn't enough for them. So realize that you are enough. When people cheat, that's their decision. That's their choice. The second thing about betrayal is the lying, because they have to lie in order to cheat. Typically, when you call them out on it, they're going to lie to you as well. So make sure, if you can, have some type of documented proof. Because most people, the sexual or romantic betrayal isn't even the most psychological destabilizing part. It's the lying and the deception surrounding it. Because cheating usually requires lying. Sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, sometimes just omissions or half-truths, or telling you they're at work when they're not, or telling you that they're going to get a call from their boss instead taking a call from someone else. But anyway, any and all cheating, they have to tell you half-truths and lies. And once you discover one lie, your mind immediately starts investigating the entire relationship. How often were you lied to? Was the whole relationship a lie? Should you have seen the signs earlier? And then it becomes difficult, because was that business dinner actually a business dinner? When they were out on Saturday doing something else, were they actually doing something else, or were they with someone else? Who were they texting? Why did they disappear for 3 hours and not come back? And is their explanation true? Who knows? Those affectionate messages that they talked to you about, were they genuine? I have no idea. A lot of people that cheat are very affectionate. They'll tell you they love you. They'll tell you how much they want to see you or they miss you, and they're cheating on the side. Because sometimes they're even more affectionate when they're cheating. But your memories become evidence, and that's exhausting. You're only grieving the relationship. You're trying to determine which part of your own history was real. It's exhausting. What you have to realize is that it doesn't matter. When you find out someone cheated, you've dodged a bullet. It doesn't matter why, it doesn't matter when, and it doesn't matter how often. You dodged a bullet because if you would have gone longer in that relationship, they would have sucked up more of your life, more of your valuable time, more of who you are. And time is one commodity we don't have. So when a person shows you who they are, believe them. If they show you they're a cheater, let them go, because that's the safest way to maintain your sanity. And that's the safest way to have self-respect. There's no single behavior that proves someone is cheating. You got to understand that. That's important to note. A hidden phone doesn't automatically mean they're having an affair. Missing a call doesn't mean someone is sleeping with someone else. And changes in sexual behavior can have a dozen of explanations. It can be their hormones are off, or it can be they cheat. It can be that they're lying about something or uncomfortable with something and they're just not interested or having fluctuations in their mood. But patterns do matter. And sometimes you begin to notice things with your instincts and the inconsistencies before your conscious mind puts everything together. It eats at you and it'll feel like a pit in the bottom of your stomach. I'm speaking as someone that has had this experience on a couple occasions. It's nerve-wracking. And for someone that overthinks, it is exhausting mentally, but you got to let it go. There are certain behaviors worth paying attention to, particularly when several things appear back to back or together, but sometimes they're so good at lying and habitually cheating, the better they're going to be at lying. And it's a red flag for you, because if they're so good at lying, you're going to say, oh my goodness, what the heck? Sometimes there'll be a sudden phone that pops up and it's a sign they might be cheating. But honestly, it's hard. It's very hard to find out. I was in a relationship with a man, and the woman that he was setting up to cheat with was married, and she contacted me and let me know that he told her all about me and that he just wanted to have a secret fling on the side. It was funny because the intimacy was there. I wanted even more intimacy, but it was there, and I was blindsided. I was shocked, actually, because I was considering that person as a future forever person. But you have to guard your heart so much, because you never know what's going to happen. Sometimes their phone used to sit on the counter and they keep it in their pocket and they never want you to see it now. That can be a sign. Or it never leaves their hand and they're always on it even when they're not doing work. They flip it over when you want to walk into the room, or suddenly they change all their passwords if you knew their passwords in the first place. Or they take it to the bathroom and notifications disappear quickly. The privacy could be normal, but if it's a sudden change or sudden explained secrecy, it might be a sign. And the problem is if you're used to trusting people or trusting that person, it might take a few things you notice before you are clued in. And other people that are in a relationship with them to step up and let you know. Or checking out other people's phones is not a guarantee to know, because I found out there's an app called Telegram where people's texts disappear. So it's a big cheating app where men and women will go on it, and people on Telegram, if they have the app, it doesn't mean that they're cheating, but a lot of them are. And there's other places besides dating apps where people meet people. People meet people on Reddit. They have whole organizations or groups of people that just want to cheat on the people they're with. It's kind of disgusting and gross. If you think about it, just the whole concept of it is gross. If you want to have affairs with people, don't get into a relationship. It makes no sense to be in a relationship with someone if you want to just go sleep around. There's no reason to be in a relationship. One of the other warning signs is when men or women are constantly checking other people while you're with them. Everybody notices attractive people, but openly scanning the room repetitively and staring at other people, flirting in front of you, or constantly seeking out other attentions can tell you something about a person's boundaries and character. So pay attention to how someone behaves when they think you're not paying attention, because it gets to the point where when they check out other people all the time, it's kind of a red flag as well. They also might have unexplained disappearances, like all of a sudden they forgot something and they have to go pick something up, and they go away for 2 or 3 hours. They were supposed to arrive at 7 and they don't arrive, or they were supposed to call and they don't call. And then they arrive 2 or 3 hours late, or they don't arrive at all. No call, no text. Then comes some elaborate explanation of traffic, or they were waiting in line somewhere, but they never texted you and let you know they were taking a long time. Occasionally life happens repetitively, but not that you need constant check-in, but if it begins to become a repeated pattern, that's something you should take into consideration. And you could have been with the person for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 5 years, and they start cheating. I will say the sooner you find out, the better. Because every time that person cheats, they put you in a risk for an STD or a life-changing STD. You have to be careful. And it's so disrespectful for them to do that. The other thing that people do is they over-explain. Like they may send you a text. I got a text one time by accident, and then the person over-explained to me, and that was like a kind of a red flag to me that something might be going on. But a lot of times we don't want our triggers from previous relationships to affect our current relationships. So we try to tamp down, or any thoughts we have, try to like say, oh, it's okay, or explain it away ourselves. Sometimes deception comes with far more detail than the situation requires. They're over-explaining stuff. They talk too much. They feel nervous. And some people, when they're cheating, they start showing more affection to you to try to act like nothing's going on. A simple question sometimes will get a 5-minute answer, or they're being more loving than they normally are and showing you more affection and intimacy than normal. Suddenly you're hearing about traffic lights, coworkers, parking spaces, battery percentages, and cashiers at gas stations because they need to tell you all the details. And it doesn't prove dishonesty if they're sharing, but when explanation repeatedly doesn't match their behavior, pay attention. Find out why they're over-explaining. Because when people are in a relationship, there's a companionship that goes along with it. Most people are best friends with the people they're in a relationship with. So when you cheat, you don't just violate that intimacy and companionship, you violate that friendship. There's also sometimes changes in intimacy. Sometimes people become less sexual, interested in their primary partner during an affair, but sometimes they also become more interested. So they'll be having extra sex with you maybe once or twice a day, and yet they're also going out to cheat. There isn't a universal pattern. Some people say, well, if they're not having sex with you, that must mean they're cheating. That doesn't mean so. What matters is an unexplained change combined with other concerning behavior, and it's so hard to predict. And sometimes withholding affection or sex can become manipulative too. When a partner pulls away, you start to wonder what's going on. You work hard to repair the relationship. You put the fault on you, and it's not your fault. If you're trying to have sex with someone and they don't want to have sex, that might be a red flag. It might be a hormonal issue, or it may be they're cheating on the side. Then they return emotionally and suddenly, and everything feels wonderful again. It's yo-yo cycle. It's very manipulative. And then they gaslight you and tell you things aren't happening when you call them out on it. This push-pull cycle can leave you constantly trying to regain the relationship and exhausted and cause anxiety. And eventually you can find yourself accepting behavior you never would have. In the very beginning, it might have been beautiful. It might have been wonderful. And then they get comfortable and they start abusing you by cheating with other people. And it is abuse. Let's not tiptoe around it. It is abuse. It's emotional abuse at the highest level. And when people do this, they don't care. And that's the problem. Later in life, this may be one of the most valuable dating lessons available. One of the things you need to do is stop giving words more credibility than patterns. Anyone can tell you they're loyal. Anyone can tell you they love you. And anyone can tell you they're being honest. They can also say, I never cheated, or I think it's gross, or I would never cheat. I heard that so many times. I've never felt like this before. You're amazing. You're the person I want. I want to marry you one day. And then they still cheat. Those statements are absolutely meaningless. But character is demonstrated through repeated behavior. I'm not one that when a person cheats to take people back, because if they've cheated on me and they masked it that well, then they're probably a serial cheater and a really good liar, because I can pick up on a lot. But what happens when nobody is forcing someone to do the right thing? Do they keep their commitments? Do they show up late? Do they tell you the truth? Do they lie about little stuff? Do they tell uncomfortable truths? Sometimes people act like they're vulnerable just to make you feel sympathy for them. Or they'll blame their exes for cheating. But how do we know? I'm not one for calling and talking to people's exes, but sometimes if you're getting, bad vibes about something, maybe you need to. Do they tell you explanations that make sense? Or do they seem uncomfortable or over-explain things? And do their actions match their words? And here's the problem. Sometimes they do, but they're such good liars that you can't tell. I hope they've respected your boundaries, but sometimes they don't. And when you're not standing beside them, you're not going to know. And hopefully you have friends out there that can let you know, or people out there that will step up. And I am happy about. There's a lot of communities out there now and people that are reporting people that cheat. There's websites out there that say, are we dating the same guy? There's apps that you can download, I guess, that you can check to see if someone's cheating. But what happens if you don't know where they're at and where they're logging in? It's a difficult find. And was it just a one-time mistake or do they own it? Are they going to do it over and over again? That's the question. Somehow somebody else is at fault when they cheat, or they blame you, and they blame you to their friends and family when they're the cheaters. Character isn't demonstrated by behaving well when it's convenient. Character is demonstrated by behaving well when no one's looking. Character shows itself when someone has the opportunity to behave badly and chooses not to. Just because somebody has the opportunity to doesn't mean they should. And shame on the people out there that pursue cheating just for the thrill of it. And you can't really find out by asking the question, have you ever cheated? That's the problem with dating. A lot of people don't want to date someone that has a history of repetitive cheating or infidelity. That's a legitimate boundary. I don't date people that cheat. I don't. I refuse to. But if you ask somebody, are they going to tell you the truth? Past behavior shows that if they're a cheater, they typically lie. Past behavior doesn't guarantee future behavior, but it's a pattern. So when you ask somebody, have you ever cheated? The uncomfortable reality is the person willing to hide an affair may also be willing to hide previous affairs. So the question itself isn't enough. You learn someone's character over time, but you have to pay attention to how they describe previous relationships. Every time their ex was crazy, interesting, or their ex didn't treat them well. But did they ever take accountability in the relationship? Every breakup was somebody else's fault. If they have a lot of hatred towards their exes and refuse to let it go, is the hatred really towards their exes, or is it about hating themselves? Sometimes repeating that they're the innocent victim in every story, pay attention, because no one's always the innocent victim in every story. Emotionally mature people can usually identify their own mistakes. They might say, my ex did things to hurt me. They cheated on me, but I understand maybe I could have done things differently, or I handled things poorly, or I stayed too long. That's a very different story from someone else whose relationship history contains 20 villains and one perpetual hero. I have fallen victim to this before too, since I had a past where I was cheated on. I was more accepting when guys told me that they got cheated on. But when they told me the story that it was, they were always the victim, I should have seen that as a red flag. Because even though I was cheated on, I've taken responsibility for how my relationship ended and how things were. And I've actually made peace with it and forgiven my ex for his cheating. But the serial cheaters that do it just to manipulate you, shame on them. And sometimes you do everything right. You pay attention. You communicate. You're very intimate. You trust carefully. You take your time. You watch their behavior, and you still don't see it coming. That's why it's called being blindsided when they cheat. When you're blindsided, you had no idea. So don't torture yourself endlessly saying, how did I not know this? Because when you're blindsided, when they're showing you affection and you're still being intimate, and they're reaching out to other people after sex just for the thrill, that's called being blindsided. You're not supposed to conduct surveillance videos on someone you love. Trust requires the ability to be vulnerable. And vulnerability is scary because you can't guarantee genuine intimacy while simultaneously operating a private detective agency on them. You have to be able to trust. And that's the scary part of relationships. Your responsibility was to bring integrity into the relationship. And if they don't, that's on them. If they have no integrity, if they have no loyalty, that's on them. Their responsibility was to do the same. Their responsibility was to be honest, truthful. And really, honestly, what do people bring to a relationship? I've dated people where they may not have made a lot of money. They were good looking, but not that great. And I was with them because I thought they were loyal. When they take away the loyal and the integrity and the respect aspect out of the relationship, and all you have is basic connection that got lost when they disrespected you, you got nothing left. If they didn't know that information was going to hurt you, shame on them. What you do with the information, though, is up to you. I don't recommend competing with the other person. This is especially important after you discover that there's an infidelity. Frequently, people sometimes become obsessed with the person that they were cheating with. What does she look like? Is she younger? Is she thinner? Does she have more money? Is she smarter? Was she prettier? Was the sex better? You need to stop. because that road leads you downward into a spiral, and it's awful. Once people cheat with people who are younger, older, richer, poorer, more attractive and less attractive than the partners, you know what I find? They were never as good as you. When they cheat with somebody that's less than, that's easy. Sometimes they cheat older, way older. But infidelity isn't a ranking system, it's a choice. The existence of another person does not establish your value. You have your value, and you know your value. You don't need to defeat the competition. You need to decide whether the person standing beside you still qualifies to be your partner, whether they're worthy of you. And typically when a person cheats, they're not. That's a different question. Are they worthy to be your partner anymore? Are they the person that cheated for no reason, just to see if they could get away with it? And I know heartbreak later in life is difficult. I know when you're 45 or 50, 55, 60, you're thinking, oh, I don't want to start over again. But you know what? It's better to start over again with the right person than stay with the wrong. They didn't think it was starting over when they started cheating. They just thought they could get away with it. And you're not starting from zero. You're starting from experience. You know more. You've survived more. Your standards should be clearer, and you should have bigger and stronger boundaries. And hopefully your tolerance for nonsense is significantly lower. There is freedom in that. There is freedom in letting go. At 25, you may have dated many people almost entirely based on chemistry. Later in life, chemistry still matters, but character should be the most important thing. And if a person's a serial cheater, they don't have character. They'll probably end up alone long term because consistency becomes attractive and peace becomes attractive. Reliability is attractive. Companionship is attractive, but only if you have companionship with somebody that has loyalty. And if they don't, there was no companionship. Someone saying they'll be there at 7 and actually showing up at 7 becomes strangely sexy. Welcome to adulthood. It's nice when people show up the way they say they're going to and are loyal and trustworthy. First, you have to accept the reality you're dealing with rather than the reality you wanted to have. Because a lot of people will tell you they're going to marry you or make plans for the future and entertain your plans for the future when they don't actually intend to actually fulfill those. You cannot heal until you realize that we're not negotiating with facts, we're negotiating with fiction. So stop demanding an explanation capable of making betrayal seem reasonable, because it was never reasonable. It's never logical. It never makes sense. Second, stop demanding an explanation capable of making your life feel better, because you may never receive one. And even if you receive an explanation, it probably won't satisfy you. And thirdly, protect your dignity, because it's disrespectful so much when they cheat. You do not have to audition for the position you already held. So you have the right to walk away, and you have the right to walk away quickly. You don't need to convince someone to recognize your value. If they don't know your value, shame on them. Someone else will. It's no big deal because you are valuable. So give yourself time before making the next step in your relationship, because you will go through some pain. And loneliness can make bad candidates look surprisingly qualified. So let your judgment recover first. And then what happens without blaming yourself for everybody else's choices is that you're going to learn that it's not your fault. Were there warning signs you ignored? Probably. Were boundaries too flexible? Probably. Will they be better next time? Maybe. Did you repeatedly accept explanations that didn't make sense? Learn from those things. Take that as wisdom. Put up different boundaries this time, but don't rewrite somebody else's deception into your personal failure. And finally, do not allow betrayal to turn discernment into cynicism. Those are not the same thing. Discernment says, I trust slowly and watch carefully. Cynicism says, nobody can be trusted. Discernment protects you, but cynicism can imprison you. Your life hasn't ended with that relationship. One of the most dangerous thoughts after heartbreak later in life is that was probably my last chance. Nope. It was just one relationship, maybe an important one. Maybe you healed a little bit from it. Maybe you learned some lessons from it. You might have believed it was going to be your last, but it's not, because the person that deserves you is still out there, and that you deserve to have better. You might have loved that person very deeply. They may have been your one for a while, and you can acknowledge that. But I'm so happy that you found out, because now you can move on. And you can acknowledge all of that without turning that person into the final chapter of your life. There are billions of people in this world. And if you're a lady, actually, it's easier to date than for the men, because most women have the upper hand. You haven't met everyone you're going to love yet. And perhaps even more importantly, if you stay open and you keep your heart open, you haven't even experienced every version of yourself yet. Heartbreak does change people, but the goal is to become wiser, not to become harder. More selective, more observant, more comfortable walking away when someone's behavior doesn't match their words, and more unwilling to sacrifice your peace simply because you don't want to be alone. I will say peace is a wonderful thing. And one thing I also notice is our body gives us signs when we think something's up. We may have anxiety. We may have more stress, or we may get angry easier. Maybe it's because you knew something was up. Something they did, a body language or something may have triggered you and you didn't even realize it. If somebody cheats on you, you don't have to spend the rest of your life trying to understand why they were willing to risk losing you. Sometimes the answer is painfully simple. They wanted what they had, and they also wanted what they weren't supposed to have. That's about their decision-making. That's about their choices. Your decision gets to come next. I want you to choose you because you're more important. Let that person with the poor values and the poor morals and the poor ethics and character go away. You get to decide what kind of behavior has access to your life and what kind of people. Elevate yourself. I have found people that cheat tend to be trashy. They tend to be low-quality, low-value people. You get to decide what kind of behavior has access to your life. You can decide what loyalty means to you. And I hope you get to decide new boundaries that you need to have in place so it doesn't happen again, but there's never a guarantee. You get to decide whether betrayal becomes something that destroys your ability to trust or something that teaches you to trust more intelligently. And I hope you do trust more intelligently, because starting over later in life, it's not embarrassing. Walking away from someone that wasn't worthy of you, it's not a weakness, it's a strength. And discovering that someone wasn't who you believed they were doesn't make you foolish or love foolish. It just makes you open and trusting. And that's not a bad way to be. Shame on those people out there that are cheating. I think after some of the cheating scenarios that have happened on the news this year, that most people should have learned better. Getting highlighted and spotlighted for married couples at concerts, people getting called out by their spouses, political people getting humiliated after cheating, but they don't learn. Once you've received this new information, you get to act accordingly and you get to choose. If you decide to go back to them, just be aware that they may cheat again. And it's going to be an anxiety thing for you. It's going to be annoying to constantly have to understand that they may be cheating on you while they're at work or when they're saying they're not around. Because sometimes the most powerful response to heartbreak is not revenge. It isn't exposing them for what they did. It's finding peace. And go back to you first is what I recommend, because you don't need to find somebody new first. It doesn't matter. Go work on you. Have time for you. It's about building a life so fulfilling that eventually you realize something. You didn't lose your future. You didn't lose yourself. You lost someone that wasn't worthy of you. And you just simply stopped building in the wrong direction. Because if they were worthy of you, they never would have cheated. And that's the truth. You need a person that's as honest and open, loyal, with integrity as you are. And so the journey continues. And I wish you the best in your journey. I hope all the best blessings for you. This is Diva Mia. I hope you have a wonderful day. Take care and stay strong.
Thanks for tuning in. Like, subscribe, and drop a comment. We'd love hearing from you. Visit thedivadetails.com to connect. See you next week for more.
Diva Details podcast and website are intended solely for informational and entertainment purposes. The content provided does not constitute professional, medical, financial, or legal advice. We are not licensed medical practitioners, financial advisors, or legal professional. Always consult with a qualified healthcare provider for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Any financial topics discussed are based on personal opinions and experience and should not be considered professional advice. The content provided does not constitute legal advice. The Diva Details and its affiliate contributors and guests are not liable for any losses or damages arising from the use of our content. The opinions expressed in the podcast are solely those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views of any affiliated organization, sponsors, or partner. All facts discussed in the podcast are researched and accurate to the best of our knowledge at the time of recording. Information may change over time. No guarantees are made regarding the accuracy, completeness, or reliability of any statements or opinions presented. It is the responsibility of the listener to verify any and all facts that may influence their decision. This podcast is for information and entertainment purposes only and should not be considered professional advice.